Welcome to Real Estate 360 Live with Ryan Sloper, the trusted name in real estate radio. Now, here's Ryan Sloper.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Real Estate 360 Live. I am your host, Ryan Sloper. For those of you not familiar with the podcast, my guest and I will cover every angle of real estate, from interest rates to the economy to what's happening in Washington. Anything that affects you and your real estate decisions will be covered here. Many people obviously have questions about mortgage interest rates, about real estate prices, where things are heading in the future. We kind of really dive into the nitty-gritty details of what's taking place in the economy. So if you're just tuning in to hopefully get like a rah-rah podcast about real estate, that's not what's done here. You know, I myself have been actively involved in real estate for over 10 years now, buying, selling, flipping, every aspect of real estate. My primary job, obviously, is I am a real estate agent. So I do have pretty much a unique view, unlike many other real estate agents, because I'm not always touting the real estate market as the best place to be. And it doesn't mean that there's not many and numerous opportunities out there for people to take advantage of the real estate market, but the reality is that many people out there don't have the ability, meaning don't have a job that they've had for 10, 15 years where their wages have been rising over some time. They have a savings account that's been going up over some time, retirement accounts that they have the ability to go and get, you know, a lot of real estate, to buy real estate and use it as an investment. So, you know, the one thing that we can do with this podcast is kind of give you a bird's eye view of what we feel like going on and how the media distorts what's taking place in the real estate market. We talked over the last month or two about you know, how real estate has really become back page news because there's not really that much taking place with it. It's been kind of stagnant. Obviously, there's been an uptick over in the month of July, so now everybody's claiming that it looks like the real estate market's going to finish strong in the latter part of this year, which I do agree it probably should because interest rates have been sliding down. Anytime you do see a decrease in interest rates, there will be an increase in people buying. That doesn't necessarily mean that the overall market means that it's really moving in an upward trend and prices are going to continue to rise. That's not necessarily the case there. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I do want to point you to the iTunes store where you can search our show, Real Estate 360 Live. If you search that in the search, you can download, subscribe, share with any of your friends that may get something out of this show. Also, if you don't have access to that, you can also go to the website where we upload all the shows every week. It's realestate360live.com. That's realestate360live.com. On the right-hand side of the website, you'll see an Ask a Question button. That's for many of you listeners that have questions about the overall market conditions, or if it's just general things. We give credit tips every week. I get a lot of people emailing in and asking questions about credit tips and things to try to position themselves to be in a position to buy at some point in time. And I'd be glad to help you out with whatever. And like I said, I don't necessarily always have the answers to all your questions, but I can find them. And we'll reach out to professionals and people in the industry that I can get them answered by. Joining me on our panel, as he does each and every week, is Louis Camrosano. Louis, a former school teacher, a former attorney, and a former general manager of a major real estate portal. Louis is often cited in the media as a real estate industry expert. He's been cited in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fox Business, U.S. News, MSN, and numerous others. Louis, how are you doing today?
Doing grand, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Good to have you back on. Hope you had a great Labor Day weekend.
I did. You?
I did. You know, it's always good to have 3 days versus 2, right? To try to rest up a little bit. Last time we spoke, we kind of talked about, you know, Yellen had given another speech basically where she's concentrating mainly on labor markets. Everything, you know, the shift. All the focus of attention has shifted away from real estate. It's mainly only on the job situation now. We do have a lot of diversions going on now, sideshows. Obviously, we've had some increased volatility overseas in the Russia-Ukraine situation. I wanted to kind of get your take on that. I did read an article, I believe it was this morning or yesterday morning, on Zero Hedge, where one of the, it was the ex-NSA director named William Binney, former senior NSA crypto mathematician who back in March 2012 blew the whistle on an NSA spying program, wrote an open letter to Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, basically saying that he felt like there really wasn't enough evidence to say that that Russia really does plan on invading Ukraine, and that he felt, much like the Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, this is a similar play here by the United States, and a diversion tactic, and that, you know, it's an effort. He didn't say this, but this is my interpretation. It is that it's an effort for, you know, the United States to keep us in a constant crisis mode, right? In order to keep the appearance that, you know, everything is fantastic here, we start shifting all of our attention overseas into, we got, you know, these major issues, and people get scared. You keep people scared. They're really not sure what to do, and you keep the dissent down. You keep the dissent down for what's taking place in our leaders here at home. I want to get your take on the Russia situation, what's taking place over there, and what you feel like the impact of that will be long-term here if we decide to really dive too deep into this issue overseas.
Ryan, the United States, as far as I can tell, if you look at all of the wars we've had probably since the 90s, have all been over, people say oil, they're not over oil, they're over the dollar. And if you look at any country who has decided that they're not going to use the dollar, they're in the crosshairs. You had Saddam Hussein talking about accepting euros for oil instead of the dollar. You know, in the Gulf War, look what happened to him. Similarly, you had Gaddafi talking about a gold-backed African, Pan-African currency, gone. Iran has been in the crosshairs for a long time because they don't want to use the dollar. Well, Russia has now become very vocal about not wanting to use the dollar. Now, the problem with Russia versus these other countries like Libya and Iraq, you can't just drive a few missiles over their country and shut them up and go capture their dictator. Right. Russia's a much bigger problem because now what they're trying to do is they realize they can't just bomb Russia. They have to put all these sanctions on Russia. And the problem with the sanctions are they actually accelerate the movement away from the dollar rather than protect it. And I don't know if they understand this because right now they're talking about kicking Russia out of the SWIFT program. Okay, so if Russia can't use the international payment system, I guess they figured Russia will just shrivel up and go away. No, they'll come up with, just like they came up with the BRICS Bank, they'll come up with their own alternative system. And you don't want countries working on alternative programs. You don't, unless you're going to bomb them all. I mean, you want them using the dollar, and you want them to be involved in the system so you keep the demand up for the dollar. And we have had the demand for the dollar because under the agreements after Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard per the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1971, didn't take us off the gold standard, he said that he was temporarily suspending the convertibility of your dollars into gold, which basically means there's no gold standard. But since 1971, the dollar has been used in international trade mainly because his history was on its side. It had been used since 1944, but really because Kissinger and Nixon had set up those Petro Dollar agreements where OPEC nations, including Saudi Arabia, would price and only accept dollars for their oil. Well, now there's other oil producers like Russia, and if you tell Russia, you know, we have these sanctions on you and you're not allowed to use the international SWIFT system, and the EU is talking about prohibiting its citizens from buying Russian bonds, what do you think they're going to do? Well, if they can't use the system, then they don't need dollars. They'll dump their Treasury bonds, and they'll only have $100 billion or so of those. But they'll also start to put other things into place which will have nothing to do with the dollar. Now, the BRICS countries are 40% of the world's GDP. If you take China, Russia, Brazil, and India, even if they were just to trade amongst themselves, that creates a large drop in demand for the U.S. dollar. So I don't see what the policy is to try to antagonize Russia, because they're obviously not going to say, okay, we're just going to back off and we'll just continue the way things were and we'll be back with the dollar. they've already passed. They keep poking them in the eye. And what's going to happen is, and people say, well, it's just Russia. They're not that big of a deal. Well, they are. They're the 8th or 9th largest GDP by GDP country in the world. But more importantly, Ryan, it's the trade that they do with others. They're not buying, as part of their sanctions back at Europe, they're not buying EU produce. Well, what's happening in the EU? A lot of produce is going to waste. The farmers are not going to get paid. And then when winter comes, Russia can decide they're not going to sell them oil and natural gas, or they're going to charge, a lot more for it. So why does Europe want to get involved in a match over Russia? Well, only because the United States tells them they kind of have to. Now,
Correct.
The EU is also a competitor to the U.S., even though they're on the same side, because the euro is somewhat on the international stage as a currency as well. So they don't have a lot to gain, Europe, with going along with these sanctions. They're the ones that are going to get harmed. The United States has very little trade with Russia, so if we don't trade with Russia, it's no skin off our noses. Right. If Europe doesn't, there's a big problem. So you can't expect Europe to toe the line forever and take a beating because the United States wants to protect the dollar.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that it is interesting, and much of that letter that he wrote, basically expressed that Putin could care less what sanctions they impose, because as you mentioned, Louis, in a way, it's helping him accomplish what he wants to accomplish, right? And this is one of these things that could really backfire on the United States. And in the short term, we have just this international conflict taking place, and we're seeing money that will probably find the flight to safety, which is typically in U.S. Treasuries and bonds, things of that nature. Just like any other time that we've had wars, we get all the money flying back. But at some point, that's going to stop. Literally, we've been talking about these international sideshows for some time now, Louis, right? And it's like this is their go-to move. Is to really just start to push and blame another country, because we can't focus on the issues at hand in our own home country. We can't.
Right.
We cannot. That's the whole point with the Federal Reserve and the manipulation that's been taking place for how many years now, the $4 trillion in printing of money. You sent me the article this morning, basically that central banks have become, there's a whole program for it. There's a central bank incentive program for central banks to basically trade everything.
Futures on the Comex, yes.
Right. So if we have central banks who basically have the unlimited ability to print money and to do with it what they want, what type of economy do we have here?
It's run for them, and it's rigged. Look at the ruble, Ryan. They're now touting the fact that the ruble has gone down because of the legendary sanctions that the West has put on them. Well, that may be a short-term victory, but if the ruble goes down, what do you think Russia's next move is going to be? They may say, you know what? If we're going to sell you oil, you're going to have to pay us in ruble. And then what does that mean? Countries have to go out and get ruble. What does that do? It boosts the price of the ruble. Yep. And it draws them further away from the dollar, and the ruble goes back up, and the dollar goes down. You don't win currency wars by these little tit-for-tat types of things, especially against a country that has very little to lose. The ruble's weak as it is. They can only get stronger by making people buy rubles in order to buy that's what the United States did to buy their oil. The United States made countries price oil in dollars and only accept oil, thereby creating a demand for the dollar. You don't think Russia is not aware that they can do the same thing? And everyone says, who wants rubles? No one. But if you need them to buy oil, then you need rubles.
Right. My question is, obviously when we have these international conflicts and when we start to really divert our attention and focus so much, the news will beat this until it's into the ground. Do you think that this is one of those things, or it is going to drag on for 2 years? Or could this be more fast-moving? Could this be something that if they do basically get NATO summit to approve more sanctions that Russia considers in regards is, very provocative, could this be one of the big moves that you and I talked about, that major event that takes place that really starts to create a downward spiral for us.
Well, here's the thing, Ryan, and President Obama typified it in his press conference the other day in the tan suit. He basically said, we don't have a strategy about ISIS. Okay? Well, if he doesn't have a strategy on ISIS, you can bet he doesn't have a strategy on Russia. He doesn't have a strategy on the dollar. They don't have a strategy at all. And you can see Putin, who's ex-KGB, clearly has a strategy.
Right.
He's putting all the pieces together. He knows when he does something, yeah, the ruble's going to go down. I'm sure he's already considered that.
Yep.
When the United States does things, it's almost like they just do and say there. Well, not thinking 2 and 3 steps behind. Now, if you look at George Herbert Walker Bush and Putin, the reason those guys got their way internationally was because Bush was the head of the CIA and Putin's the head of the KGB. They know how this stuff works. Now, if you look at the problems now in the ineptitude with the Syrian, ISIS, and so on, that all plays into Russia's hands. Because right now, if ISIS is the problem, the key to ISIS is Syria and Iran. Well, we were yelling and screaming we had to bomb Syria, we got to take out Iran. Well, now we need them as friends, and who's backing Syria and Iran? Russia. So we have to go to Russia now to solve our problems with ISIS when we're telling Russia to go pound sand and we're going to put sanctions on you? Then none of this is thought out. Putin put himself exactly in the position where he wants, where he now has bargaining position. He says, okay, we don't take your food. That'll harm you. You can go ahead and trash the ruble all you want. We still have the oil, which is more important than the currency. And we have the backing of Iran and Syria. And if now the tables are turned, just like during the Afghan war, the United States supported the Al-Qaeda against Russia, right, when they were trying to keep Afghanistan under their control when Russia invaded Afghanistan. Well, now Russia has the same concept in reverse.
Right.
They can, they have the kind of the terrorists on their side.
Right.
It's really this thing. I think they don't know how to end it. The United States. They don't have an end game in plan. It's not as simple as when do we take out Gaddafi? When do we take out Saddam Hussein? It's not like when are we going to take out Putin?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they have those plans too. The CIA is probably trying to out how they can assassinate, cause unrest in Russia. I'm sure they have people on the ground there doing that, just like Russia has people there trying to create, social unrest here. But I don't know if that's going to work. His approval rating is ridiculously high, even though economic times are bad.
Oh, yeah, they're all behind him.
They're like 70, 80% behind him. Now, I don't know if they make that up, but I don't think so, because the people in Crimea, I don't think that was a rigged election. They voted 90% to go with Russia.
Yeah.
Now, in the United States, when you have bad economic times, the president and the Congress, their approval rating goes to the toilet. And that's why it would be even lower. That's why they keep touting the economy is good. People know it's not, but some people are convinced that it is.
Well, and then when you have the president coming out and basically what he describes the recent activity in Ukraine as a continuation of what's been taking place for months now, it's not really a shift. Like, okay, so yeah, this has been going on for months. You're not telling us anything that we didn't already know. And it basically goes to the point that, like you said, he doesn't have a plan, and he doesn't want to actually pretend like he's paying too much attention to it, like it's a big deal, right? But there's the whole, like I said,
because he'd rather focus on health care and social inequality and that kind of stuff.
Right. Things that aren't moving our country forward at all.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the president's job basically is, just like the federal government's job is to protect the country from foreign and domestic threats, right? And that's about it. I mean, it's not meant to do all these things that it does. That's supposed to be left to the states. And if the president doesn't want to focus on foreign policy, isn't good at it, basically he wants to get down to the community. We use the word community organizer, but if that's what he wants to do, that's not really what the president's supposed to be doing. He's not supposed to be commenting on a disturbance with Trayvon Martin or something in Ferguson. That's not why the presidency is set up.
Right.
That's a local issue. but they want to make it into a national discussion on race, those types of things.
Yeah, and what does that spark, Lewis? I mean, if you read Twitter and Facebook, I mean, people get all wrapped up in these issues because the president wants to comment on things, right? Because he wants to take a position. Everybody else wants to take the same position, but nobody's worried about what's going on with the Federal Reserve. Nobody's worried about
because there is not. There's no way you can say whatever happened in Florida or any of these incidents that happen, they're all unique set facts and circumstances. And what they try to do is make it one size fits all. It's either an indictment on race relations in the entire United States, and it's a diversion.
Yep.
Because then everyone has an opinion, everybody wants to talk about it, and most people don't even know what happened. They want to hear, the 30-second clip, and it's just divisive.
Yeah.
You either want to say it's the guy was shot down and it was 100% racism, or you want to deny that there is racism.
Right. Yeah.
Well, what good is that conversation? That has nothing to do with some of the real issues. Now, it's a real issue if you're involved in it, sure. But
right.
it has not, but in your life, Ryan, you don't run across those types of things.
Well, what's funny is that everybody is,
and most people don't.
Yeah, well, it's always like we want to move ahead as a country, and we want to get through like the racism and the hatred and all this stuff. But yet, the only thing that's peddled from the top all the way down to the bottom is the same stuff. And what happens is, unfortunately, people don't have filters where they can see something on the TV and say, you know what, I'm cutting that off. I'm not even going to listen to it. I don't care to listen to it, because realistically, the only way that we would actually, as a country, be able to get over this stuff is to not listen to the news, not read the newspaper, not listen to social media, not do all these things, which is impossible now. Technology has basically made it so they're going to pound it into your head. It's instant gratification. People can complain or call the racism card or do whatever they want to do through social media outlets, and it's what gets people through the day sometimes. Lewis, is just the constant bickering and arguing.
Yep. And where do those stories come from? It's not. Most of these stories, even though you say that the mainstream media is dead and it doesn't have the influence, it does, because it handpicks these stories.
Mm-hmm.
Social media did not push a lot of these national stories to the forefront. They were brought to the forefront by the mainstream media, picked up by social media and alternative media, and then commented on by national figures.
Yep.
But they're not national stories until the mainstream media decides that they are. And they pick them for a reason.
Right. Yeah, and so
why wouldn't any, if you think about it, there's murders every day across the country.
Correct.
There's examples of abuse every day across the country, racism, whatever it is. But why? Who chooses this one? In other words, like the Trayvon Martin case, was that the most egregious example ever of racism?
I'm sure
Probably
it was.
Not.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
But why did that story? I don't have the answer to it. It's not a rhetorical question. Why did that story become the story that was an international story?
Well, it's probably no different. I mean, I don't.
So that stuff happens all the time.
Well, I mean, they're planted stories, Lewis. I mean, these stories are basically, highlighted and given all the attention because they know that it's going to drive a wedge between people, right? It's going to create controversy. That's what they want. When you create that controversy, it allows them to continue to suppress people and to keep people down and to,
sell advertisement too.
And sell advertising, and then you get where people take and come up with these creative headlines that people don't even bother to read the story. They read the headline, and they take everything from the headline, and all of a sudden, you got people hating people again because
I think what they also do, Ryan, I think they purposely create these stories. I don't think it's not that they're not doing their job or they've covered up. They come out with a story, and it's outrageous on its face on the first day. And it's just like, oh, this is the worst thing that ever happened. So that becomes entrenched. Then they come out with a week later, 2 weeks later, well, maybe it wasn't like that. So they get the other side all riled up. With the you guys don't report the news, and this is not true. Whereas the first thing that they put out there is entrenched in people's heads. I saw a guy on TV talking about he saw the video where the gentleman that got killed in Ferguson had his hands up and was yelling, "Don't shoot me." Now, there is no video about that.
Right.
But that's in his head now, and that's part of the story. So, and the same thing for other people. They'll believe anything that exonerates the police officer.
Right.
And that's what you have going back and forth. And who cares? Other than the people involved, it's really not a national story.
Yeah, because as you mentioned, there's probably 150, 200 other crimes that were just like that throughout the country, probably. You know what I mean?
And there's cops, abusive cops in every department, and there are good cops in every department, and there are good citizens in every town, and there's bad citizens in every town.
Right.
Why focus on one and make it a national issue?
Yeah, and that's where I'm back to the whole thing of why wouldn't people be, out there picketing about what the Federal Reserve has been doing for the last 4 or 5 years if they actually realize what's taking place, and how this is just a big old, basically Ponzi scheme and an effort of just mass manipulation of all markets conditions here. I mean, if we try to create something like on the business level, we'd be locked up, okay?
It's a total scheme, scam, a Ponzi scheme, manipulation, monopoly, everything you want to, anything you want to throw at it. None of it is free market.
No, it's not at all.
And the press looks at, you have all these bankers. If you think about it, if we're worried about the economy, wouldn't you be more concerned what products GM is coming out with, what Apple is going to do, whether fracking is going to work? No, we care what the bankers have to say about interest rates. Like Janet Yellen is going to drive the economy. Now you just look at it and you say, she probably can't even drive herself to work. Right. And we've given bankers this, the media, this godlike stature that they're going to fix the economy when they don't produce anything except speeches and manipulation. Right. We're not interested in what's behind the countries, what's companies, their innovations, their policies, their plans to bring product to market and how they're going to do it. That's not what you hear about. You hear about what the bankers are going to do.
Yeah, and that article that you had sent me, it's funny because the first sentence in there basically talks about the one thing that had become clear was retail and increasingly institutional investors and traders are gone, probably forever, and certainly until the Fed's market distorting central planning ends. Which is not ending anytime soon, guys. That's the biggest problem is that it's so far gone. I mean, it's gotten so much worse. And when we pull this back to real estate, as we always do, Louis, so it's like, okay, so right now we have a ridiculously low interest rate environment. It has been a low interest rate environment for some time. All of the economists said interest rates had no place to go back up. Well, guess what? When you have a central bank that has so much control and they can print money at the drop of a hat whenever they want, they can control interest rates masterfully, as well as they can continue to buy up all the mortgage-backed securities, the Treasuries, anything they want.
Right.
And whatever.
And you won't know about it.
And you won't know about it. We've
because you can't audit the Fed.
You can't audit the Fed. We talked ad nauseum about how we know that there's manipulation of gold and silver.
Happened this morning.
Yeah, for no reason it was getting hammered down. And it doesn't
naked short selling in large amounts in one trade drives the price down. No one does that except if they want a result that's not economic to themselves. They just want to drive the price down.
Right, but what does the eye test tell us, right? Russia, China are stocking up on gold and silver reserves, right? Like these big, massive countries obviously see the forest through the trees, right? There is a bigger plan for countries outside of the United States. We may think that we're the end-all, be-all, but unfortunately, there are other smart countries out there that are positioning themselves for the long term. And we, unfortunately, are not doing that. We continue to print and dilute the value of our currency, this fiat currency, which I always mention will become extinct at some point. It just doesn't matter.
But they're trying to delay that, Ryan, because the dollar is where the game is for the United States, nothing else. So everything the United States does is about supporting the dollar. I'm not going to talk about gold and silver. I'm not going to talk about anything other than that's why central banking is front line and center. What are they going to do with interest rates? What are they going to do with QE? And how do they protect the dollar? It's all wrapped into the dollar because the United States is dominant because of the dollar. It allows us to fund the military. It allows us to get politicians elected because we can fund the welfare programs. It's the key to the United States way of life, not the productive capacity anymore. It's that people want our dollars, so we produce them. And if the demand for the dollar goes down, then our way of life goes down. And our dominance goes away.
Well, and we
and don't you think China and Russia know that?
Right. They have to.
Of course they do.
And the whole point of having like economic news, like consumer sentiment reports, personal income, jobless claims, all these different things. Well, guess what? If people don't want to buy that the Fed's manipulating things, well, you sure as heck should buy that they're manipulating these reports how they see fit. Because
of course, they want people to spend money. A dollar system requires inflation. Ever more dollars out there requiring increasing demand. If you have a reduction in demand for the dollar and reduction in supply, that's why they hate deflation, and they what's the word? They demonize deflation so much, and they talk about you have a target inflation rate where you actually want prices to rise because it creates more demand for the dollar.
Yeah, well, when was the last time that we had like a big miss on a report? It doesn't really happen. Like if they're expecting like July personal income was 0.2%, estimated at 0.3%, personal spending negative 0.1 versus an estimated of 0.2. Well, we're never going to see personal spending minus 5%, right? We're not going to see a huge miss. It's going to be just enough to make somebody question, but not enough for them to say, "Oh, looks like we're in trouble." And
so the last miss we had, Ryan, was what? The GDP in the first quarter.
Correct. Yep. And we had last week.
That was explained away, and it proved them right that it's the weather. The second quarter will be much better than it was.
Well, and here we go again.
True, but
yeah, and I want to kind of segue back into the real estate side. So one of the things was on August 28th, we had pending home sales, which were up 3.3% versus an estimated of 0.6. So that was a pretty big miss to the upside, which is
they needed
great.
That one.
They needed it, right? Okay, so now they have something that they can potentially put this either in the middle of the newspaper, maybe closer to the front, because now they can start claiming once again that housing is back, okay? So I'll segue right over to...
It was just the weather.
Right, I'll segue over to one of my favorite blogs because Keeping Current Matters, because all they do is basically, this is a site where they're trying to get real estate agents to buy their services so that they can, tout that real estate is back all the time, trying to push this constant housing boom. And the headline reads, "A soft housing market," with a question mark. "We beg to differ." Okay? They go back through. Move Inc. just last week revealed that spring's housing market finished stronger than any time in the last 3 years. In the report, Jonathan Smoke, chief economist for Realtor.com, explained, "This is the first time since the beginning of the recovery that we expect to see positive momentum throughout the second half of the year. While seasonal patterns are emerging in July month-to-month comparisons, all other metrics point to fundamental market health and a buildup of momentum." What are we basing this on? 1 month. We're basing it on an uptick in existing home sales in July. Is it a coincidence, Lewis, that interest rates have actually gone back down? There will be an increase in sales any time that interest rates slide back. It happens.
An increase off of a small base, though, Ryan.
Absolutely. Well, it gets better because they go through and they're just citing off all these different reports, right? Like, so new construction surging. According to an article on MarketWatch, new construction is surging. U.S. homes, construction on U.S. homes jumped 15.7% in July to the highest level in 8 months and starts to revise up sharply for June, indicating a pickup in home building after an early year.
You know how bad it was in the last year, though? Home building was at historic lows. It was lower than the 70s and the 60s, new home construction. For it to surge in the last 8 months doesn't take much.
Well, hold on, because I got one even better than that. Foot traffic is at year-high numbers. Foot traffic, the number of people out actually physically looking at homes has a strong correlation with future contracts and home sales, so it can be viewed as a peek ahead at sales trends 2 to 3 months into the future.
Yeah, when you're unemployed, you got nothing to do. It doesn't hurt to go around and look at overpriced houses.
But let me explain why foot traffic would be up, in my opinion, anyway. When you have a low interest rate environment and people that are actually out there looking that don't feel pressed to buy immediately,
right.
They can take their time. There are those buyers out there. I do believe that the smart buyers, the people that do have cash, they've been sitting back just kind of waiting for their house to come along. They don't.
Right. And price reductions are now, they say, 25-30% of homes now across the country. Even in San Francisco, there's price reductions now. So, of course, you go out and look.
There's price reductions all over the place, which is why one of the things that I want to bring up on today's show is the importance of pricing your home right the first time. right? Like especially in a market that we have right now where the homes that are flying off the shelves are the turnkey homes, the homes that have been, basically completely redone, remodeled, whatever it may be, that it's the ideal home on the block, right? It's the diamond in the rough that everybody wants. It's priced right.
And are priced about the same price as the other ones.
Absolutely. And there's most of the time a big difference. And to give you an example, like you'll have, a couple houses that are above market value. Let's say market value is $500, but the 2 or 3 houses on the neighborhood will price at $515, $520, $530. They'll sit on the market. But then you'll have this one that comes along that has everything basically turnkey, ready to go, and they price themselves at $500 or $499, right? What ends up happening to that house, it ends up getting bid up most of the time because they priced it right to start, and so they generated what they like to call foot traffic, and so they get the foot traffic through there. They create a frenzy because they priced it to sell, and lo and behold, it normally sells in a week or less, and everything else is sitting at 30, 60, 90 days on the market. I mean,
with no foot traffic. I see that around here too.
Yeah, and these are trends that I'm sure are not just isolated to like Northern Virginia, D.C. Metro, or San Francisco, or these big metro areas. I guarantee it happens all over the country. When we start to see a decrease in demand, or just not as much buyers out there, it's going to be a lot more of a picky situation where they don't feel like they have to settle. And that's going to be a trend moving forward. I feel like there's a lot of renovated properties, Louis. A lot of investors that had bought properties to buy and flip, right? Well, if you literally have like 5 flips on the street, the one that's going to sell is which one? The one that's priced the most reasonable, right? Unless there's something that where it's so blown out, like where there's marble floors and everything else, that people are willing to pay the additional money. But most investors are not putting marble floors in flips. They're, it's just the basics. It's going to enough to get interest. But the thing that I'm advising all my clients now is to make sure that you're priced appropriately the first time, because you're going to lose a lot more money than you care to. And it's never I told you so. It's just these are the facts. This is what happens. You need to be the one that's I'm not going to say below market value, but you have to be priced to get enough people through the door where it's going to be like, wow, this is the best priced house on the block. And you're probably going to get more money than if you price it higher and have to make a price reduction. Your first price reduction is going to be at least $10,000. Okay? Then the next one's probably going to be $10,000 or $15,000. And then by the time you're done, you're like, wow, I just lost 5 to 10% off my sales price. But reality is that most sellers always think their house is worth more than what it really is.
Well, why they think that? Not just because their ego is involved in it, but because the media's been telling them there's a housing recovery and housing prices are going up.
Yeah, and Zillow and Truly, when you punch those things in, it's like, oh, well, look what this house sold for up the street. Look what they've got their house on the market for. I always tell people, if you ever use price your home based upon what another house is active for sale for, it's a terrible.
I get in these discussions with people all the time. They say listing prices are higher. I said, yeah, and there's 30% of them get reduced. So what people put out on the market? I can list my house. I don't have a house, but I could say it's $2 million. And people say, see, home prices are going up. No, they're not. People are just listing their home prices higher. They're not selling at that price.
Yeah, and it's one of the more hated things about this business, that, in my opinion, is when people say that they want to test the market.
Yeah.
Right? It's terrible. It's a recipe for disaster. And
real estate agents take the listing because they can't otherwise get a listing unless they agree to list it at that higher price.
And that's one thing I will not do. If they
won't make any money if you do that.
Well, not only that, they can test it either on their own, or they can hire another agent that will tell them what they want to hear. The reality is that it's my job to make them the most amount of money on their home sale, right?
Right. And quickly as possible.
And as quickly as possible. And I'm doing them an injustice if I just accept that and I go along with their plan. So I've been doing this long enough that I've seen what happens when they do this, and if somebody still doesn't want to listen to me after we go through that, then they're probably going to end up not selling their home. Or they're going to list it with another agent. They're going to fire that agent. They're going to hire another agent, and they're going to drop their price by 10%. So, it's a formula, right?
Yep.
It's a formula to selling your house. If you take the proper steps, you'll probably sell it. But if you are just going to go and, Joe up the street lists his house for $500, I should be able to get 505, 510. You don't even know what the inside of Joe's house looks like. So, I do have a pretty...
And they also don't want to fix up their own house. I've been in houses, in not necessarily open houses, but just when you go to a showing, and they're disgraceful. I mean, they may have, tidied up a bit, but they haven't shampooed the carpet. They're just not ready to show.
Or how about the ones that don't have pictures at all?
Well, other than when you go actually visit them, well, that's ridiculous. Then you won't even go visit it because you see an address and a picture on the outside.
But you know what, Lewis? I see every day, because I review homes in Bristow and Gainesville, right where I live. I do video reviews of these homes every single day, and I see at least one listing a day that it could be 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 that doesn't have pictures. Now, the one thing that signifies to me is that I probably don't want to see the inside. Right?
They don't want you to see the inside, but somehow they want your $500,000.
Right, and I'm like, okay. So one of the biggest components of selling your house, so we know that there's a million sites across the internet. Now, anybody that tells me that if somebody comes to you with a $1 million looking brochure that's got great pictures, and guess what? They don't even get the brochure unless they get in your house. Okay? So if you take the time to hire professional photographers, I do agree, especially if it's a vacant house, it needs to be staged. People don't like vacant homes. It's always been that way. When I buy and flip real estate, trust me, I've tested it. Houses sit on the market longer when they're vacant because they can't vision anything.
Right.
So, when buyers come through, they're trying to figure out, where would I put my sofa? Where would my bed go? How would this room, flow? And if you're not eliminating, see, these are like objections that people have. And when people have potential objections, the first thing that they do is they start knocking it off the sales price. So you want to give them every reason to not, have an objection.
This house is unfurnished. I'm not paying it.
Exactly.
Right? I mean,
you know what, though, Louis? It happens all the time. Somebody thinks that because they put granite countertops in the kitchen and nice upgraded ceramic tile in the bathrooms, that's going to overcome the rest of the rooms being vacant. Well, especially in small spaces, if you don't have furniture, people think that their furniture is not going to fit in there. Okay? Right.
I also notice people walk quickly through rooms that have nothing in them.
Well,
so they never really get a sense of what they're looking at. They think, this house isn't for them. Like you say, it's too small.
There's nothing to see, right? And
nothing to see here, right?
Literally, so last week I took a listing. It's in Alexandria, which is a very nice, about 15 minutes outside D.C. right there. List price was going to be somewhere around $800,000. So I told them specifically they had already moved. They were moving, retiring down to Georgia. They were going to have this house. It was going to be vacant. So before they even packed up their stuff, I had the stager come through to say what furniture they could leave in the house so we could keep the house somewhat staged, and then the stager brought in other furniture. I'm telling you, Louis, that the house looks like night and day different from when they had all that basically they were moving stuff out, and now the stager brought back in her furniture, and it's just not, it's not even a lot of furniture. It's minimizing. Minimizing actually always looks better, right? So you minimize, you add some trinkets and stuff, you put some pictures and paintings on the wall, and it looks like a model home now. I have about 100% better chance to get the higher price that they want because we took the steps. Now, did it cost money? Sure. Does staging cost money? Does a professional photographer cost money? Yes, but it pales in comparison to the amount of money that you can lose if you don't do those things.
Well, there's also studies done, and we did them at Home Game, that the return on investment for some of those lightening, brightening, home staging, you get your money back.
Absolutely.
You more than get your money back. So you pay a stager a few $1,000s. You make much more than you pay that stager.
Yeah, I feel like it's honestly like a legal form of smart gambling, right? Like if I told you, Louis, that you could put $1 into the slot machine and it would spit back $2, you'd do it all day long, right?
Right.
So I tell people the same thing.
Well, there's a 90% chance you'd get $2.
Correct. If I could tell somebody that now, barring there being like power lines or something behind their house, something that's probably going to be a bit of an issue anyway, but even if there was power lines, I still feel like we'd still get the money back. If we spent $2,000, let's just call it on staging and professional photography, and I was able to get them $10,000 more back because and the reason why I just came up with 10,000, it could be anywhere between 10 and 30,000. But the one thing that we did was we created an environment to basically eliminate potential objections by a buyer. Okay?
Yep.
What that typically means is they don't ask for 3% seller concessions, right? They might write that full price offer up. They might pay above list price because they feel like this is the most presentable house in the neighborhood that they've seen.
Yep.
And, I mean, it always goes to you have to be able to essentially tell a story with your home when you're trying to sell it. And the better job you can do and the way that you convey this story, number one, is you better have good pictures on the internet because that's the first place everybody starts their search.
Right. People think marketing is being online and having your listing there. No, it's what the house looks like, how you present the house, not where you present. Yeah, you need to be marketing the homes online so people get to them, but the more important part of the marketing is how's the house presented. Well,
Lewis, I wrote a book, and it's called The Warren Buffett Approach to Sell Real Estate. It's basically a practical guide to protect yourself from real estate greed and bank an extra $30,000 profit by taking a value-driven approach. So, now, while I might not agree with everything Warren Buffett does, I do agree that a value-driven approach is always better than basically a cost-driven approach, right? You're always looking at price. You want to create as much value as possible for a potential buyer so they're willing to pay above and beyond. He does the
You don't
same
want
thing
to tax yourself? You don't want to make speeches about taxing yourself because it's not fair and then do inversions?
Right. Well, what I'm looking at is he buys these companies like Bubblegum and things that are going to be around forever, right? And it's more value. He's not going to go out and buy Facebook. That's not a value approach for him. And so when you're trying to
even during the internet bubble, he lost those gains for 5 years. Never bought any of them.
Yeah, and his approach is all value driven. When you read all of his books, it's what it's based on. Well, I take the same approach to real estate. So if I can eliminate all the potential hurdles that a buyer has, and if I can create as much value for that buyer, that means I have the best chance to get the most amount of money for them. Now, the way we do that is we do pre-inspections on home. We have a home inspector come through and fix everything that's potentially wrong with the home before the buyer gets them done. We can set up a home warranty. We put a home warranty on the house that transfers over to the buyer when they buy the house. We stage the home. We take professional pictures. We do all the things that basically eliminates any fears or doubts that a buyer would have. Well, guess what happens? Naturally, when you eliminate all people's fears and objections about why they might want to buy something, they're going to be willing to pay more money for it. Right?
Total
it's the same. Yeah, and so this approach, like I said, there's a formula to buying and selling real estate, mainly selling it. I feel like it's, buyers, they're just looking for the best deal out there. But sellers, their goal is always to net the most amount of money. Follow the simple rules, and it can be done. If you guys want a copy of the book, all you have to do is reach out to me. I'd be glad to send it to you. It's, one of those things that this has just been my experience over the last 10 years of the way to get the most amount of money out of your home sale. And that's about it, Lewis, for today. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, Lewis, and check out your blog, can you give them your contact information in your blog, please?
Sure. Smaulgld.com, SMAULGLD, Smaulgld.com. And if you go there, you'll see a blog post or 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 times a week on the real estate market, gold, silver, Federal Reserve, the economy, and check it out at Smaulgld.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Lewis.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to us at realestate360live.com. Also, you can go to the iTunes store, as I mentioned earlier, and download, subscribe, share to the podcast, Real Estate 360, in the search bar. Also, if you'd like a copy of the Warren Buffett Approach to Sell Real Estate book, you can go to getfreebook4charity.com, getfreebook4charity.com, and I'd be glad to get one of those out to you. Until next time, guys, take care.